Welcome everybody to this Family for Every Child online event. I am Diohema Anlleu. I am a director of advocacy at JUCONI, and today I will be your host. We will be sharing this event with two other organizations that belong to family. Now, before we start the event itself, I'd just like to remind you that we have interpretation available in both English and Spanish. So on the screen, you have the instructions for selecting the channel of your choice. So click on interpretation and then choose the language, English or Spanish, and also click mute original audio. So you will only listen to the interpretation. We are going to start a poll right now. Please answer as we start the presentation. This is just to get to know everybody on the call and to get to know a little bit about how who you work for. So you should be able to see the poll on your screen. Please answer it. If you have internet issues or a problem with your connection, an option is to turn off your camera to make way for audio mainly. And at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, and we'll be happy to listen to you and to know your opinions about the presentation. So here we'd like to foster an open dialogue, and we'd really like to have a conversation. Thank you very much for being here with us today. If you have any questions, we have the chat box available, and we have Jess and Anne-Marie who are supporting us with any questions you may have. Please ask that through the chat. So welcome once again. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Anne-Marie? So Family for Every Child is a partnership of 45 organizations located in 38 countries. Our goals are about preventing family separation and strengthening families and guaranteeing alternative care and special protection for children whenever necessary. In this webinar, we have 3 member organizations, and we're located in Latin America and in Europe. In North America, and as members of a family, we have unique knowledge about the girls and boys' situation in local contexts. So we also have solutions and efficient interventions that can improve the life of the children. As a worldwide alliance, Family for Every Child, the alliance that we all belong to, we work to make sure for children to be able to grow up in protected environments and in families, and to make sure that children receive adequate care. We have worked together on this project, which is a project about children and adolescents on the move. And the 3 organizations that are here collaborated, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute, but we worked specifically on the topic of the migration route, the corridor. We know that the corridor between Central America, Mexico, and the US is the largest one worldwide, and thousands of people, including girls and boys and adolescents and young children, both and young people, unaccompanied and accompanied, well, they go through this corridor, and we know that they face tremendous risks to their well-being. And we also know that these girls and boys and teenagers carry out this voyage, this trip, and we know that it involves many dangers, and therefore it's very important that we listen to them and we try to give them the protection they need. So we have an innovative proposal that we want to present today, and it has some proposals on how to deal with the situation. So we'll be presenting that today, and then we will share some conclusions from the first phase of a project that we have. And we also talked about the methodology. The methodology used is called Photovoice. And here we'll talk about our efforts to make this trip, this journey safer. So this is today's agenda. We will have a first presentation at a panel level so that we can explain how this project was organized and our actions were organized. And then we will have an open dialogue with you in order to share experiences and to listen to any questions you may have. I would now like to introduce the people with us on the panel today. So we have my colleague, Miguel Ángel Rojas Garzon, sorry. So he comes from Fundacion JUCONI, and Ángel has a broad experience working with families that suffer from violence, and he coordinates some programs from family. I also want to introduce Ron, who is the director for legal services for children in San Francisco, and Legal Services for Children offers free representation for children and adolescents that need legal advice for migration custody. And this is in order to help girls and boys attain their full potential when they're in the US. We also have Miguel Ángel Lopez Guerra, who is a social psychologist, and he works for CONACMI in Guatemala. He has more than 25 years of experience on children's protection in Guatemala, and he has experience in children's mobility. And we also have Ilinisa Hendrickson, who is a consultant from Three Mountains. This is a consulting group that is focusing on integration and action and participation. They have carried out qualitative studies, and they helped us in this process. And their goal is to enlarge the voices of the participants. They have been doing follow-up and technical support, and we're very happy to have two special people invited. We have Juan and Ingrid with us today. These are two young people that participated in the project as well. So they will share with us what the process was like for them and how this project has helped them in their well-being. So without further ado, I will now ask Ron to please talk to us about the beginning of the Photovoice project and our alliance with family. Please go ahead, Ron. Thank you, Diohema. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here today in this seminar. This project started as a small seed more than 3 years ago in an on-site meeting from Children on the Move, Niños en Movimiento in San Francisco, California. The members of Family for Every Child gathered to discover the unique challenges that children face whenever migrating to the US. This is a map that shows the reach of our members and the locations of our members of Children on the Move. As you can see, where it's in most parts of the world. So at the end of our meeting, when we started creating or planning joint actions, we started building on the idea of safer migration. We had already participated on several debates with with the parties and the stakeholders. However, realized we needed to have a larger voice given to young people. And so we had a presentation made about Photovoice, or in Spanish, Photovoz. And we also had two young people that presented their experience. So at the end of the week, we agreed on a joint Photovoice project with people participating from Guatemala, Mexico, and the US. And CONACMI, JUCONI, and services for legal services for children agreed on collaborating on a project. Then sadly we had the pandemic as affected us during 2019 and 2020. And then we had Jessica Laura participate with us, and they all decided to innovate, and they created the first virtual Photovoice experience. Now, this happened during autumn 2020. We had a group of young people that participated through Zoom, just like today. And we have two of these children here, the young people here today, and they will share their experience. We have also completed a second group during the spring, and our experience have been even more innovative because we also have facilitators based in Guatemala and Mexico, and we also have young people in the US, people who have migrated from these countries. So we have someone presenting today that will share the results from our research. And yesterday, here in the US, we had an elections day, and migration is always an issue of political debate. And that happens not only here, but also worldwide. Last week, 2 ships with dozens of children and young people suffered accidents at the coast of Greece, and this took the lives of very many young people and children. Now, this is alarming. What can we do before we're in the face of these kinds of tragedies? How can we create a movement? We just had a report published, and the title of this report is How Courageous We Had to Be. For me, this title really reflects the courage and the bravery of the children that need to go through abuse and poverty and persecution and violence. And they're seeking a place where they can have protection and well-being. I hope our representatives can actually show that same bravery and courageousness whenever they need to offer some kind of protection or consolation for those affected by the current situation. I hope that we'll be able to work together for a safer migration. And we need to work at different stages before migration, during migration, and also at a post stage of integration. Thank you, everyone, once again for being here. Thank you, CONACMI, JUCONI. Thank you, Family for Every Child, Tres Montañas University of California, San Francisco, and also thank you to our young people. Thank you, Ron, for this overview of the project. It has been a long project, as you said, and we had to be innovative in order to be able to move forward. And yes, it is indeed very important to listen to the voice of young people involved in this project. And the title, How Courageous We Had to Be, is important because it does reflect the position that we need to have whenever accompanying others. So I will now like to ask Miguel Angel from CONACMI to continue with the presentation and to talk to us about his experience from Guatemala. Please go ahead, Miguel. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's always a pleasure to be able to share with each of you. Now, I would mainly like to focus on the context of the reality that people live in Guatemala. I think that the conditions within our country don't allow people to stay. And that's why I think talking about the context is so important. Now, here we have several elements. First of all, in Guatemala, we have a population of around 17 million people, and it has a GDP of around 77.6 billion. According to the World Bank and figures from 2020, it has one of the largest economies in Central America, and it has a medium to high income according to its GDP.
However, in the last 3 decades, the growth has been the least volatile one in the region, and we have public debts and budget deficits among the lowest and stable in the world. However, the economic stability has not given as a result a significant reduction of poverty and inequality. Instead, the low income of the central government, corruption, and impunity have limited the capacity and the quality and the coverage of the basic public services from education to health. Next one. So in Guatemala, we lack reliable source of statistics to understand the population, but we have some data from 2014 from NCOVI that shows that 59.3% of the population live in poverty, 23.4% live in extreme poverty, and they have some unsatisfied basic needs and lack of basic services such as health, education, drinking water, sanitation, and housing. Food and safety was very high before and after the pandemic, and 3.2 million people have difficulty in accessing a good source of food, especially in the indigenous communities. Next. Guatemala is has the fourth highest malnutrition rate in the world, the highest in Latin America and the Caribbean, especially the indigenous and rural communities. And so this malnutrition affects infants, especially they have retarded growth. 47% of all children under 5, 58% of indigenous children, and 66% of children in the lowest income quintile. The production is always in the cities, or especially concentrated in the cities, and many people cannot afford to buy a basic food basket. So, January 2022, August 2022, over 528,000 people left Guatemala, bound for the States, and that means 550 people every day, including children. So I'm going to focus now on the data for 2022. In the case of Mexico, the Migration Department in Mexico reported 6,710 children and adolescents migrating from January to June 2022. You can see the data broken down. Next. As reported by the United States, the Migration Department in United States, from January to August, 56,342 children from Guatemala had been detained. So there's been an increase of 85.8% of children and adolescents that had been detained and expelled from the states coming from Guatemala. Next. So only in 2022, from January to November, Mexico had expelled over 80,000 Guatemalans. Why am I talking about this? Well, this is an important context, and that shows that the population is not going away just for nothing. We recognize that migration is a right, but anyway, government should guarantee that people can live a decent life project in their countries. Otherwise, people will migrate. So Guatemala is not just a country of people who migrate, we also receive immigrants. In this case, we're receiving immigrants from many countries, especially from Venezuela. If you go out in Guatemala, you can see many people from Venezuela, even children, minors, even infants and
nicaragüenses, haitianos, cubanos e inclusive, como le llama migración en Guatemala, extracontinentales que pueden ser provenientes de Asia, ¿verdad? O provenientes de África. Durante el 2022, los guatemaltecos fueron el tercer grupo de nacionalidad más detenida en Estados Unidos, solo por detrás de mexicanos y cubanos. Pero a nivel de México, los guatemaltecos ocupaban en los últimos 3 meses también uno de los primeros lugares de detenidos por migración mexicana, solamente por detrás de venezolanos, pero junto allí con nicaragüenses. Por favor, si continuamos. Y con esto quiero cerrar. En Guatemala hay un doble discurso y una doble moral, ¿verdad? Hay una situación de parte del gobierno que no responde a esa realidad. Se estima que en Guatemala hay más de 4 millones de personas, de ciudadanos guatemaltecos viviendo en los Estados Unidos, la mitad de ellos indocumentados, y darles permanencia y protección laboral debería ser un objeto de una planificación estratégica por parte del gobierno guatemalteco, porque las remesas que los migrantes envían a Guatemala equivalen al 18% del Producto Interno Bruto en Guatemala. Es decir, el monto anual de las remesas familiares excede el monto anual de las exportaciones en el país. Es decir, el año pasado, podemos continuar, el año pasado en el 2021, podemos continuar por favor. El año pasado en el 2021, Guatemala recibió más de 15,000 millardos de dólares en concepto de remesas, ¿sí? O sea,
in remittances. So this is a double discourse on the part of the government because they want to protect migrants, yes, but they also neglect them. If you can have some data, for example, it is estimated that at the end of 2022, over $17 billion will have been sent to Guatemala in remittances that will increase the GDP. That will not increase the GDP. That will be higher than the GDP. And so little progress has been made so far. There is a department for the protection of minors, children and teenagers. There is no surveillance at all of the children and the teenagers. There is a protocol, national protocol, and some criteria, especially for unaccompanied minors, and committee for minors and families, the Congress of the Republic, for a dialogue with Mexico and the United States, and we need much more. I just want to finish by saying, next. I just want to finish by saying that it is important to note that if structural causes that explain migration in a country, if they don't change, migration will still be going on in these conditions, these risky conditions for children and teenagers. So we, as members of Family for Every Child, we are trying to prevent separating children from their families, and secondly, find efforts for the reunion of these families. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for this context. And yes, the comments in the chat suggest that, yes, indeed, this is a lot of children moving from Guatemala northwards. Thank you for your opinion. Thank you for this information. Thank you for this data that shows us the context. And I agree with what you're saying. If we don't change the structural causes, anything that we will do or that will be done won't have any impact. So Miguel, thank you, because now we will listen to what is going on in Mexico. This is the second part of this read that starts in Guatemala. So can you please talk about the situation in Mexico? Thank you, Miguel. Now, Anlleu, it's your turn. Thank you. I would like to give you the context of the mobility of children and adolescents in Mexico. But I want to say that in JUCONI, Mexico, we understand that children and teenagers might be not just migrants, they might be refugees or asylum seekers and or internally displaced. So in our national legislation, we have therefore broaden this concept of mobility. I want to give you the context of Mexico, but first I need to mention some data. UNICEF Mexico reports 120,000 children and adolescents in the last 4 years, but they don't reflect the full reality. Anyway, we can see this is an approximation. We know they're not the reality, they don't reflect the reality because they just reflect the official data held by institutions. But this mobility can also be informal and they are overlooked by institutions. So this means that the risk is higher than acknowledged. It is recognized anyway that the migration flows are increasing, especially in unaccompanied minors. We've also seen that the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, did not decrease the numbers. It increased the numbers and the risk conditions. For example, in Tapachula, Chiapas migration station, many foster centers, many centers needed to be expanded because they needed to get for more children. Even if they were big enough for 100 or 200 children. For example, in one of these cases, one of those centers that usually accommodated 100 or 200 children had to accept 20 times their normal size. And in some cases, the children were traveling with their parents. Sometimes they couldn't even speak the language. Sometimes they couldn't even speak Spanish. And in some cases, they came from violent situations, violent conditions that created some problems. It is true that the public policies are trying to give more rights and protection to children, especially girls. So we can see some progress. Anyway, we have been struggling because of the pandemic. We have also proposed to prevent forced returns, detention, and permanence in such detention centers. And we need to find new protection centers, new protection plans, and we need a restitution plan for the rights of these children and adolescents in this mobility context. Next. We'll give you some more information about the progress that has been made. In 2022, a law was passed, what was called the General Law for Rights of Children and Adolescents. And there are some articles from the 89th to the 101st that established that children are subject to special protection measures that will guarantee their rights. Especially if we take into account that it will be the national system for the protection of families who will bring protection to children and adolescents, not the migration, not the National Migration Institute. So the National Migration Institute will obey the national system for families for the sake of the children. Will be the priority. The national system for families will identify priority cases, for example, refugees, the progress that has been made this year has also made it possible to create a special protocol for children at risk. And the national system will have to update the database of unaccompanied minors. First version has already been released, together with other organizations in last October. In JUCONI, we want to insist on having a social dialogue about the situation of these children and adolescents so that we can articulate the necessary protection. And this is where these kind of methodologies and tools are important. I'm talking about Photovoice because that way we can systematically and from a psychosocial point of view help these children. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. So this joint work has made it possible for us to sign some alliances. We understand that some rights need to be fulfilled so that they can really benefit from full protection, not just in Mexico, but in the whole route. Thank you. Thank you, Angel, because this second part of the puzzle, the corridor, the route Mexico, was important because yes, I understand that the official data do not fully represent how many children use this route. And thank you for talking about the progress that has been made in Mexico and how the civil organizations are jointly working with the government. That gives us hope on one hand, but on the other hand, that doesn't really cover everything, and a lot of work still needs to be done. And thank you for talking about Photovoice as a methodology and as a project that has given us some very innovative tools that we needed to make some social progress. And now Ron will be representing the third country in this route. Thank you for talking about your experience with children arriving in the States. Thank you. Ron, you have the floor. So as Miguel Angel and Angel were explaining, the causes behind migration journey are very diverse. I've been working with migration children and adolescents for 30 years. I'm really awestruck because they show courage and resilience. The reason why the United States have not yet developed a plan for humanitarian aid for immigrants is a huge obstacle for the children, adolescents, and others to come to the States. In the United States, many of the policies are punitive. You might remember the family separation policy that was passed in 2018. Many children were separated from their parents for years, and they were held in detention centers. We have a joint collaborative report, and we want to educate people and let people know about the situation in the United States, and we want to give voice to children and adolescents, and that's why Photovoice is a perfect project. The recommendations of this report are very profound, and we hope we will create more movement around these migration flows in the States and more awareness. In the States, we offer legal counseling, help to migrants. We've been doing that for 30 years, and it's not enough. The resources we have in our country are not enough for all victims, for all users, but we keep on fighting and struggling and making progress. But the most important thing for me are the recommendations contained in the report. And I will stop here so that we can have more time for the other speakers.
Thank you. So right now we tried to give a general overview from the 3 different countries. Now we would like to listen to Ilinisa from Three Mountains, who will talk about her experience and how they have supported the Photovoice project. Ilinisa, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Ilinisa Hendrickson, and I'm a participatory action researcher with Three Mountains Consulting. And I just want to say it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful for the work that Family for Every Child and JUCONI and CONACMI and LSC are doing, because this is an unusual project. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees states that it's vital to place refugees at the center of decision-making processes concerning their experiences, but very few opportunities exist for refugees to make recommendations for other refugees. And this is especially the case for youth refugees. So if we all had our cameras on, I think we could look around and see that most of us are adults, and we're talking about youth refugees here. But as Ron just mentioned, what do we do to elevate the voices of those who are actually experiencing this? These are the lived experiences, those who have completed the migration. And so as a result, oftentimes the policy concerning international youth migration, it focuses on the challenges and the struggles, and it doesn't meaningfully engage youth to draw upon their assets and their lived experiences, and it doesn't work to develop solutions. So as we've heard from CONACMI and JUCONI and LSC, things aren't changing quickly. So what can we do to promote safer migration? And is it us as adults who haven't been through this migration who are making these decisions? What Family for Every Child did and the Children on the Move working group did is come together and said, what is a methodology we can use that centers youth voices? And they looked to a different kind of research. And what sets this type of research apart is looking at participatory action research. And it's different from most kinds of research because both researchers and community work together to understand a situation and take an assets-based approach. And then the goal is not to end there, to just understand it, but to work to change it for the better. Different levels of community involvement are possible, and they can include the design, the research design, the data collection, the analysis, and the determination of actions to be based on results. Participatory action research has a focus on empowerment of the community where the research is happening, and the goal is to improve and understand the world by changing it. So it can take many forms. You've probably seen participatory surveys that are happening, sometimes digital storytelling. That's something that Family for Every Child has done as well. Participatory mapping. And then this particular method, Children on the Move working group chose to work with Photovoice. And Legal Services for Children, who's a member group, had done Photovoice in previous work and had great success with it. And had decided that this, working with youth and with migrants, that this would be the method. Photovoice was first developed by public health practitioners, Caroline Wang and Marianne Burris, in the 1990s. And it combines ideas from feminist thought, critical pedagogy traditions, and participatory photography. And it's unique because what's so wonderful for youth is that it asks individuals to take photographs in response to research questions. And then it facilitates group dialogue and these photographs. So any of you who know youth know that that's something that is incredibly compelling for youth is the amount of photos that youth take these days. And so this method, I've been doing Photovoice method for 20 years now, but especially with the uptake of mobile phones, this method has had even more traction with youth who are just taking photos and photos and photos. So it is it's a method that youth have even more connection to. And Photovoice involves three main steps. So the first is individuals are asked to take photos in response to research questions based on, and this is important, their concerns, but also their strengths. So it's not just what's wrong here, but what's also something that's your strength here. So including this assets-based approach. The second step is critical group dialogue about the photographs is facilitated by skilled Photovoice facilitators. And this critical group dialogue is the Freirean group dialogue. So this idea that together we're going to create something together and maybe spark something that would be different than if you were just talking about this yourself. And then the images, captions, and titles generated by the co-researchers are presented to those who have the power to affect change. So this is not just some report that is written up and filed away in some journal, but these photos are presented to those who have the power to affect change. So for this particular project, already we've had presentations where the youth are presenting their photos. They're talking to people with the power to affect change. We're trying to reach people in Washington, D.C. who have power on the Hill. We're working, and the youth are doing advocacy work. And the big part of this too is it's the community researchers themselves in this project. It's the youth themselves who are the advocates who are working for change. The critical group dialogue in Photovoice is generally structured to be facilitated with questions that probe the concerns and strengths. And the attention.
Una serie de preguntas que generan que van de la mano con el poder narrativo de las fotografías. Ahora, seguramente si han estado en un grupo con jóvenes, no se pueden simplemente hacer preguntas y esperar que nos respondan, pero si ponemos una fotografía, si la mostramos y les pedimos, por favor, vamos a hablar de esta fotografía que me has mostrado, esto puede llevar a muchas cosas. Podemos hablar de los
took here, or what does this remind you of? Or you can lead into so many different places than just saying, you know, why did you migrate? Or, you know, what would bring safer migration? But if you ask someone to take a picture representing, you know, what are the reasons for migration, that's a very different place. So for our Children on the Move Photovoice, 4 research questions were developed, and this is also very important, by the member groups themselves who serve unaccompanied migrant youth. So by CONACMI and JUCONI and LSC. So this was not outside researchers, but these were the groups themselves. And you'll see as we move forward with the results from the report, but it's the youth themselves answering these questions about why do you think children migrate? What are the risks of migrating to the United States? What helped you during the journey? And what changes are necessary for safer movement for youth migrants? And what was so interesting with this is that we had 2 different groups that ran, and then coming together with all of these different responses. There's so much here, as you'll see, so many photos, so many captions, so much narrative. And as Ron said, like so many interesting findings that also some findings that haven't been seen in other work. The youth also came together with recommendations for policy that they're now moving forward with advocacy. So the method of Photovoice isn't just this needs assessment or a method for evaluating stories or data. Its critical centerpiece is this call for action, and its roots are Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy. The dialogue among the youth is centered around photos, and it really elevates this individual's experience to a shared experience, and is really trying to locate this within larger social and political and historical structures. So we've seen a lot of these maps that have been put up as we've gone through this morning, but what does this look like around the social or the political or the historical as we're talking about maps and we're looking at the numbers and we're thinking about all of this? This is something the youth have been thinking about together in these groups. The lessons from this project are what we can think about together here today of how we can include youth in the design, the data collection, and the analysis of migration research. So first, based on the numerous findings from this project, it both echoed previous research, but just these 2 groups also uncovered new areas to explore. And co-research recommend using a participatory action research method to involve youth. So they themselves said, we think there needs to be a lot more of this. Second, for research with youth migrants, the focus on photography and the power of photos and captions from youth to spur critical dialogue on such a difficult topic makes the Photovoice method one that's recommended for youth migration research. And third, the centerpiece of action steps that are part of the Photovoice method make this type of research really stand out. The participatory research helped create a foundation for the youth migrants to advocate for US policy development on youth migration. So together, we wrote an article that is being published in a journal that is in Washington, DC. They're holding exhibits and they're moving forward with action steps. And I did want to end, a youth co-researcher did say at the end of this, when we were doing our evaluations, that her quote was that she believes that this Photovoice project creates hope because we talked about what we suffered to come to this place and things that we can help change for the future youth who cross the border every day. So I want to say thank you so much. And again, thank you to these organizations who are willing to engage with those who have made these journeys and to elevate youth voices. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilinisa, for this explanation on how the Photovoice methodology helps build stories, but also how personal work can be done from this research, and then how we can lead to discussion within public policy areas. So thank you very much for your support from Key Mountains, and which has been very complicated because of the pandemic, but thank you. I would now like to give the floor to Ron. Okay, thank you, Diohema. Thank you, Ilinisa. I will now mention Ingrid. Ingrid participated in the Voice project in autumn in 2020. She comes from Guatemala. We give the floor to Ingrid, who will share her experience with migration and her experience in participating in Photovoice. Are you ready, Ingrid? You have the floor. Hello. Hello, everybody. So my experience when I came to the US, I came alone on the way. And I went through many places I did not know. And I was scared. Because I thought I was going to get lost. But fortunately, that didn't happen. I was safe. And I managed to come all the way here safely. I was scared. But then I came here with my family. And they are here in the US. My experience in taking pictures and photos was interesting because by sharing a photograph and by speaking about what I went through throughout my journey while taking the picture was it was interesting because I was able to share what I felt along the way on the way here to the US. I also learned a lot from the experiences shared by other participants. Thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you for being one of the courageous ones to come from their country to the US. Thank you. I will now give the floor to Juan Lopez Franco. So we met Juan at Servicios Legales, Legal Services. We met him around for 5 years, and he came in as an intern, and he helped us with the 2 Photovoice groups that we have. The one from fall 2020 and the one from spring this year. And then Juan became a leader and he's worked with Ilinisa, with the young people, with the facilitators from Guatemala and Mexico. And without Juan, the last group of pictures, of photographs would not have been ready. So I will now give the floor to Juan, who's going to give recommendations, and he was going to talk about the report. Please go ahead, Juan. Thank you. I am Juan Lopez, and just like Ron mentioned, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you, Ron. Can you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you, Juan. Okay. Thank you very much, Ron, for having introduced me. So, as it's been said, I coordinated the Photovoice project, and I would like to talk to you a little bit more about some of the conversations around the photographs. So this is the first conversation, the first question we have. So why do you think that girls, boys, and adolescents and young people migrate to the US? So we have the first picture from the participant, and here we have a caption. It says, many children always dream with attaining their goals, but unfortunately, they don't always have enough opportunities, and it's often the case that their dreams are destroyed because they have to start working at an early age. They have to stop going to school in order to have enough to eat each day, and they have to sacrifice a lot in order to just be able to have a meal each day. In Central America, we sadly don't have as many resources as we have in this country. So there's a great diversity of questions and answers, and we have experiences like this shared by children and young people from different countries. But here it all comes down to the fact that children and young people migrate out of need. It's not because they want to, it's rather because they think that the only opportunity is to improve their lives is by going abroad. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this was a second question, and the participant shared this picture. The question is, what are the risks in migrating to the US? It's an open question, and the participant answered with this picture. It's a sneaker or a tennis shoe near a railway, and it's a very moving picture because we know that migration sometimes implies taking a train, and children know just how dangerous it is to have to jump onto a train and move towards the US this way. But here the participant called his picture "Life Changes from a Dream," and he says that there are moments in life where we bet so much on an uncertain future. We bet so much on a place that only exists in our imagination. But as people say, you have to start with something, and we hope for everything to be okay, but it's all uncertain. And sadly, it's often the case that things come at a very high cost. So this recognizes and shows that children know what the risk is at trying to cross the border, but they move on with their dream nevertheless, and they try to get to the other side and try to have access to better opportunities. Next slide, please.
So the third question for the third week is, what helped you in the journey? And this is a reply by one of the participants. This is the caption of the picture, a jungle, a miracle. This is the title, and the caption is, even if I was always traveling in a group of 15 or 20 people, I chose to walk alone, No, sorry, I didn't choose to work alone. I had to work alone from time to time. I was even alone in the jungle. I had to sleep alone, surrounded by animals and all that. So I say, I thank God. And now I see this picture and I see myself in here where I am. And I say, Holy Father, help those people who are right now are traveling, crossing and going through everything that I went through, and help them, please. Show them your grace. Bless them. So this is very important because this is their testimony. He was telling how hard it was for them, but at the same time, he was hoping for the people who are right now doing the same thing, hoping that they will be blessed and being helped by their faith or something that will help them. Fourth question. This is the last question, and this is one of the questions that spans more suggestions and recommendations to change the situation for future migrants. What necessary changes do you think are needed so that children, adolescents, and youngsters can travel safely? And this is a picture showing two persons traveling together. The title is Count on Me. And the caption is, people need communication with someone during their journey, which states, people need signals of what they're facing. So what they like about this picture is that when the children and adolescents are in this journey, they cannot communicate with the people they trust. Sometimes they are alone, they travel solo, they travel on their own, and they meet foreigners or people they don't feel comfortable with or safe with. They feel lonely. So these are the 4 questions, and this is that was the first part, the first section. The next section will be sharing the recommendations made by children and adolescents. Here we have a list of recommendations made by them. We have classified them before the journey and after, during the journeys. For example, before the journey, they recommend guaranteeing that the children, adolescents, and youth that are considering migrating are familiar with the risks of migration. That shows the need to be transparent. So before choosing to migrate and beginning the journey, they need to be aware of the risks. They also recommend guaranteeing safe traveling for the children and adolescents and the youngsters, so that having like an authority or an organization that will monitor special means of transportation for minors traveling from one country to another, so that they can rely on it instead of trying to figuring out how to get from point A to B. And of course, and I know this is dependent on police authorities and police decisions, but it should be great to have visas or other documents issued to children and adolescents so that they can safely migrate among countries. special visa that will be valid in Mexico, Guatemala, and the States. During the migration, children recommend not separating families, give food and water to the children and adolescents, grant access to medical health care, safe place to sleep, nurturing the children, and granting information and giving information to the people they will encounter. Next. And now more sets of recommendations for detention centers in the States. They again recommend not separating the families, educating the immigration officials on the rights of adults and migrants, adults and children that are migrating, granting safe and more comfortable conditions for the detained children migrants, give references, services for help, legal help, social help, etc. Guaranteeing a fast transition of the case once they're in the States, from the detention centers to hostels to their reunion with their families. So they say that many children and adolescents complained about how they were treated by officials in detention centers. And finally, the integration of the youth in the United States, because they need to understand how to integrate in the United States society. So they suggest giving more opportunities for empowerment, and Photovoice is a great tool for that. Guaranteeing a better communication between the United States government and young migrants in Central America, creating more opportunities among peers for young migrants in the United States, more scholarships for migrants, more monitoring for students even after graduation, more opportunities for bonding, and more work development programs for migrants. And we have used Photovoice especially for this. And well, this is it. Thank you. Back to you, Diohema. Thank you. And I want to thank Ingrid for her testimony, because it is important for us to hear the testimonies of the people who have gone through this process. Thank you for talking about the project Photovoice and the conclusions, the suggestions that came out of it, because we precisely want to guarantee safe migration. So this is the first, this is the end of the first part of the Photovoice experience that we want to share with you and Children on the Move. And now we have time for questions. I see a question for Juan. The question is, during your journey in Mexico, did you go to a foster care place? No. No, because I did have a visa. So many of the experiences I went through were different from experience of other people or teenagers that I know. But just by being here, I feel like related to what they say. So I didn't go to a shelter, but I can relate to the others' experiences, because being in an unfamiliar country and speaking an unfamiliar language and seeing yourself as the other, someone who doesn't belong in there. is similar, but no, I didn't get to a shelter or a refuge. Thank you. So you have the resources being shared in the chat box, and you can download the report both in English and Spanish. It was a report made with the organizations, by the organizations. If you have more questions, please put them in the chat box. These are questions for the panelists about the use and the results of the Photovoice methodology. So, yeah, Jesus from Save the Children, thank you. I just wanted to thank. This is a thank you message, not a question. I would like to thank Juan for his testimony, because of course we need to pay attention to
la ruta de protección, ¿no? Digo, de la ruta migratoria, perdón. Entonces, ya lo presentaba Ángel, en México se elaboró un documento que se llama Ruta de Protección Integral, que tiene muchos desafíos todavía para poderse implementar, porque justo establece
recommendations that tries to articulate the different authorities. And we, yes, of course, we are aware of the lack of training capabilities for officials and the special needs of women and girls. So as a region, I think we need to focus on cross-border collaboration, the sharing of information between Guatemala, Mexico, and the States. The person from Guatemala said that they didn't have enough statistics or statistical data. Mexico does have some good statistics, but we need more collaboration between the three countries. And finally, it's important to know that in Mexico, for example, we had an increase of people coming from Haiti, and Venezuela. So this corridor is being expanded to other countries and even Africa, I know. So there are some language barriers now, more language barriers. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Jose. We know of the work we want that you do in Save the Children. We've collaborated with you and the JUCONI Foundation. So this really complements the vision that we are hearing and Juan's words. Now we have a comment by Rita Panica. Thank you, Rita. She is thanking Miguel, Ron, Angel, and Juan because it was very informative and insightful. My thank you to Ingrid for sharing her experience and the risk involved in the journey. The Photovoice research really captures the lived narratives of the young persons, which a written narrative may not have brought out so starkly as for the risks, dangers, and the resilience. Any more questions? Please raise your hand. So since we're getting to the end of this webinar, maybe you can share best practices in your work, in your daily work, and maybe we can give you 3 minutes to anyone who can really share any best practices. No? Well, I can make some announcements. We've given you the link so that you can download the report in English or Spanish. Next week, the virtual gallery will be available. You will be able to have a look at all these pictures and stories. Children and the move. The testimonies of the people, the children, adolescents, and young persons. So if you want to give us your emails, we can share any more future information we'll get with you. So we can share all the information and the webinars and the meetings we organize as a group. So please be aware of the launch of the gallery next week. Stay tuned. And if you have more questions, it's the time now. Any more comments or closing comments on the part of the panelists? So there's a comment in the chat box. Shirley Castillejo says, I work in the Decent Inclusion project by Fundacion APSI in Ixtepec, Oaxaca, and we share stories of the journey of children and adolescents that we have accompanied with workshops with social workers, psychologists, and legal counselors. That's very important. Thank you, Shirley Castillejos, for sharing that with us. I just wanted to say something else. Yeah, sure, Miguel. I just wanted to thank you. I would like to thank Family for Every Child, especially Anne-Marie and the rest of the team for their involvement and solidarity in this process. And I would also like to thank all the technical staff and Tres Montañas Remountains for their technical support occasionally, but it was very important for us. Of course, this has been the fruitful collaboration. This has been the result of a long collaboration that has made it possible for all of us to be here today. So thank you, because it's always good. We still have some more minutes left, and you can find the link for Change Makers for Children community platform that Felipe Mireyes has just shared with you. You will be able to see the gallery in that link. Any more comments, Ron, Miguel, Angel? Yes. Yes, yes, Ron. Ingrid, Juan, thank you for sharing your experiences. I just want to say that the report is ready in English and Spanish. You can share it with your networks, because that way we can spread the word of those people who took part in the report. Angel? Thank you, Ron. Thank you. I just want to say thank you. I'd like to thank the invite and the whole process and the work with Photovoice project, because we need to give visibility to those children and adolescents on the move. This is a hot topic. It has alarmingly gone up. It's been increasing, so we need alliances to find solutions. Not just the phenomenon in itself, the phenomenon will continue, this process, this journey will continue, but we need to know the networks we have, the tools we have, so that we can support them. Thank you, Angel. And now we have Información Taller de Vida, who's saying in the chat box, thank you for the images and the words that make us aware of what children on the move face. And Rita Panica is looking forward to reading the full report. Thank you. So, Mo? Yes, Shirley Castillejos is thanking us for the link to Changemaker. Anyone can join. And I want to finally thank you again, especially Family for Every Child, who has supported us for this webinar and the whole process, and Three Mountains, and has given us the methodological support that will enable us to keep making progress in this project. We will replicate the Photovoice project in Guatemala and Mexico for children on the move. And CONACMI and JUCONI and the rest of organizations would like to thank you for this webinar. And I hope we will be able to find more spaces for communication of the results and the participation of these adolescents and children in this Photovoice project. Thank you. Have a great day. Yeah, there's a closing poll now. This is an assessment poll. And thank you very much for your attention. We want to keep up. We want to follow up with you. So please input your answers in the closing poll, and we will be able to invite you to the next webinar. Thank you, Juan, Ingrid, and everyone. Bye.